Alyn Ware, as many of you may already know, he's a peace educator and international peace and disarmament campaigner. He's the co-founder and global coordinator for Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, Peace and Disarmament Programs Director for the World Future Council, and other organizations. So he previously served as executive director of the Lawyers Committee on Nuclear Policy and founded and directed the Mobile Peace Fan and other peace education initiatives. He's also one of the leaders of the successful campaigns to prohibit nuclear weapons from New Zealand in the 1980s and to achieve a ruling from the International Court of Justice on the illegality of the threat or use of nuclear weapons, the subject of today's good legal story. Alyn, welcome, and the floor is yours.
It's a great pleasure to be talking about the case we took to the International Court of Justice, the World Court against nuclear weapons. It was a big case. We had to fight against the nuclear armed states who are very, very powerful in the UN system to get to the court. We had to work very hard to win the case. And then we've been working on follow-up to it. You know, what we wanted to do was to show that nuclear weapons are wrong. It's not one government or the other government, but it's the nuclear weapons themselves, and that no one should have them, whether it's the Soviets or the Americans or whoever, now the Russians or whoever. So that's when this idea of going to the court to take the issue of nuclear weapons themselves was so interesting to us. It's called an advisory opinion, which I think is a bit of a misnomer, because it's not really an advisory opinion. It's actually a real case in the court. But the UN Charter, or the Charter and the Charter, the Statute of the International Court of Justice, calls an advisory opinion to distinguish it from the other type of case, which is called a contentious case. A contentious case was what the nuclear weapons tests case was. Two countries, Australia and New Zealand, took France to the court for particular behavior that that country was doing, testing nuclear weapons in our part of the world. But this one, we wanted to say, hey, nuclear weapons are bad. And so that's why it fits the advisory opinion approach, which is where a body of the United Nations, like the Security Council or ECOSOC or UNICEF or the International Labour Organization, the World Health Organization, the UN General Assembly, there's about 11 bodies of the United Nations that are authorized to take cases to the International Court of Justice. And then the court decides whether or not it's going to hear the case and what its opinion will be. And we thought, yep, this is the best approach. And so it was like a legal dispute. So we actually got advice from this wonderful, wonderful lawyer from the United States, Professor Richard Falk, who said, look, if there's a legal dispute like this, the International Court of Justice is the place to take it. And we go, what a great idea. We weren't so skeptical about the International Court of Justice as some people are, because we had seen good results from cases in the past. We'd seen 1974 nuclear tests case where New Zealand and Australia took France to the International Court of Justice over atmospheric testing. What happened thereafter? France stopped its atmospheric testing. We saw the Nicaragua case against the United States, because Nicaragua, the United States was supporting the Contras and was mining the harbors and, overthrowing, trying to overthrow the Nicaraguan government. The court case, which went in Nicaraguans' favor, helped pave the way for the Costa Rican peace accords. So we had seen, the value of taking a legal approach in a big dispute like this. So the UN General Assembly is an interesting body of the United Nations, because every member country of the United Nations gets one vote. So China has one vote, which is however many billions, about 1.5 billion people. Samoa gets one vote of 100,000 people. Nauru, of a population of 8,000 people, gets one vote. So it gives a much bigger voice to smaller countries around the world to ensure that their voices are heard. They're not drowned out by the big, powerful countries, which means that it's possible to get a majority in the UN General Assembly on an issue like this if you can persuade, more than half the 192 member states to take it forward. There are two things to ensure that you win the case. One is the law. You have to have decent legal arguments. But the other is actually the way it's framed politically, because the judges on the court although they are bound, to apply the law, most will come into a particular issue with like some way that they're thinking about it, with a framing. And then if they've already sort of got a perspective on it, they will find the law to back up that perspective. And they'll sort of elevate that law, and the law that opposes their perspective, they go, oh, that's not so important. So the political framing of this is as important as the law. And it's inspired this new campaign to take the issue of climate change to the International Court of Justice in order to bring the force of international law to bear on the responsibility to protect current and future generations, and that responsibility has to come up the front. Economics shouldn't be at the front of this. Political expediency shouldn't be at the front. The responsibility of international law to protect current and future generations, which was part of the nuclear weapons case, will be brought to the fore if we can get the climate issue to the International Court of Justice.